All right. Good evening, everyone. This is Aiden from SJT. I'm coming to you live today to discuss the ongoing war in Tigray with our guest, Brother Jeff, who's kind enough to come back and hold a discussion with us again. I also have Danny, who's part of the SJT Press team and is willing to also facilitate with our discussion today. As you can see, I'm all decorated in hair style. As you can see it, it's called Konano, and I have my kuticha and my earpiece, my, of course, flag, as well as the dress. It's because this week is Ashanda week. It started last week, actually, and it's the biggest holiday for women of Tigray in general, where we celebrate our freedom, we celebrate our youth, we celebrate our womanhood, who we are as women. But unfortunately, due to the siege in Tigray since November 4, 2020, Tigrayan women have been subjected to siege, subjected to rape, subjected to torture, and subjected to genocide. And the few lucky ones are out in the field fighting for their humanity, for their rights and their family's right, including my family's right. And I as well, in my part, I'm doing my best to advocate for them, for myself, and for my family. Hence why you're seeing this. So even though we're in a dark moment, we're still going to celebrate them. We have to celebrate them and support them. But without further ado, if there's any questions from my brother Jeff or Danny, I will be able to answer questions in regards to Ashanda. But without further ado, I think we should get into the discussion. And Danny, do you want to kick us off with a few questions and updates?
Of course, of course. Happy Ashanda to you, Eden, and to all girls and women celebrating Ashanda. Brother Jeff, welcome back.
It's a
Good to
great
see you.
pleasure to be here.
Sure.
Aiden, happy Ashinda, and to all of the women and youth and everybody that has been putting together these incredible, celebrations in the midst of, incredible tragedy. The contradiction is, I would imagine, very overwhelming. So I would like to just say, happy Ashinda. And with that in mind, I'm just amazed that you're able to continue to do what you're doing in terms of advocating in the midst of this global humanitarian crisis.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, it takes a lot. It takes a lot, courage and energy, but they are doing the work. We're just merely here. Yes, we're advocating, but they're doing the hard work for us. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So with that said, really, fascist Abiy, Isaias, and then Hara Fano have commenced a second round of genocidal war on the people of Tigray, as you all know. I'm grateful for TDF defending Tigray. Uh, However, I'm just so puzzled, Brother Jeff, that the West is just watching. No meaningful action thus far. If you hear the WHO head, Dr. Tedros Adhanom, saying, "Is it because of the color of their skin, the Tigrayan people? Uh, Look what's happening. Look in Ukraine. U.S. and the international community is doing everything that they say they couldn't do for Tigray, uh, from money to all the materials that they need." So, with that, I guess my question to you, Brother Jeff, questions actually, do they really care about us, the West? Number two, uh, as you know, there was a peace talk that went on since March of this year. What happened to it? Why did it fail? Well, so-called peace truce led by uh, African Union and U.S. is heavily involved, as well as EU, as you know. And then, really, I mean, my third question to you would be: is Abiy really playing the West, or is the West really systematically aligned with the Abiy regime? Thank you, Brother Jeff.
Very powerful questions. I'll try to address the ones that I'm holding in my head, and then, we can circle back around and just have a fuller conversation. I think you began with the words of Dr. Tedros, head of the World Health Organization, Director General. And it was amazing to hear him talk about the humanitarian crisis in Tigray is the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet. It's hard to underscore the magnitude of those words when someone tells you that this is the worst crisis on the planet. That says a lot. And many of us have been trying to reconcile why this would be allowed to continue. Today, we're in 667 days of that crisis. 667 days of, as we get into Ashanda, a genocide that has its signature on the bodies of women. In other words, systemic rape. 667 days of starvation, lack of access to medical attention. We just recently saw the bombing of a kindergarten school in Mekelle, and we thought that that was horrible, and it is, and it was followed up with the bombing of a hospital. All of this is taking place right now, 667 days into the genocide. And Dr. Tedros just blatantly put it on the table. He says, we have to consider the fact that these are Black people. It is the color of the skin. There is nothing that would allow anyone to endure this anywhere inside of Europe, and now or the West, and now we have Ukraine as a backdrop to prove the point. Everything we've been talking about as it relates to this genocide in Tigray is taking place in Ukraine on a smaller scale. Let's underscore that, on a smaller scale. We're talking about, some would say, over 500,000 deaths at this point, contrasted with 3,000. Billions of dollars are being spent in Ukraine. Military assistance, technical assistance, a strong, stern stance against what's taking place in Ukraine, and the opposite is taking place in Tigray. So I have to agree with Dr. Tedros and say, yes, this has to do with not only the color of the skin, but the region and the total disregard for the humanity of the Tigrayan people, and then also, just Blacks in general. It's hard to hear. Some would say that that is, an unreasonable argument, but many of us have heard Dr. Tedros and are in full agreement with what he said. When we talk about Abiy Ahmed, and is he playing the West and the US, or is he being played? We have to remember that Ethiopia, the modern imperial state, is an establishment of the international community. And so there is nothing that would lead me to believe that Abiy Ahmed has the power, the capacity, the intelligence, or anything else to play the West or the US. So I would say that the West is complicit, the US is complicit in their silence. In their silence. That silence to me equals complicity. And Abiy Ahmed may believe that, he is doing something that the West and the US do not know about. You can't hide a genocide. I believe that these Western, these European powers, the US, understand that they are utilizing a strong man approach. In other words, brutality, to keep a population in check, which would lead to stability at the expense of democracy. So it's either human violations or the recognition of human rights. I don't believe that the West, the US, or any of those European powers believe that African nations or nations of color have the capacity to lead, govern from a standpoint of human rights, because to do that would undermine this ideal of racism. And so is Abiy Ahmed playing or being played? I believe that he is carrying out a plan that is sanctioned, and the silence of others are allowing them to have the excuse of it has nothing to do with us when it has everything to do with them.
Well, great, brother Jeff. Just to follow up, or I guess with that question, are they playing? Is he playing the West, or is the West systematically aligned with him? Because of the so-called Ethiopia? And then I guess my second follow-up is, how can we still hope that the West is, partaking in this, especially, particularly the U.S. May act on the bills that are out there, which are HR 6600, then S3199. As you know, we have put petitions out. We have been, doing our advocacy work and those things, and those bills are still sitting. HR 6600 sitting in Nancy Pelosi's desk, and then so is S3199 and Senator Chuck. And so those are my follow-up questions.
Let's address the alignment question, and let's address it from the standpoint of the Nobel Peace Prize. Many are still wondering why, in such a very short time, did Abiy Ahmed receive a Nobel Peace Prize, and who were the actors involved in not only the receiving of a peace prize, and if it was a peace prize between Eritrea, Isaias Afwerki, and Ethiopia with Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, then why did one individual receive a peace prize when it's a collective effort? The larger question is, what was the agreement? What was the alignment? What was the cornerstone of that peace? And many don't understand what that is. I don't know what it is. Most people don't know what it is. But there's one thing that we all were able to recognize here in the United States, and that is Donald Trump. If you remember, at the time, President Donald Trump said he is the one that should have received the Nobel Peace Prize, not Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. The President of the United States said he was the one that orchestrated what took place. These are not the words that I'm saying. These are the words of Donald Trump, another, in my opinion, self-centered leader that is totally invested in personal power, to say that he is the one that should have received that Nobel Peace Prize. So I'm saying that to say that there's an alignment that many of us don't know about. We don't know the details, and we don't know why, with just a meeting and a short period of coming to power of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, that the accolades were poured upon this individual. And shortly following, you have the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. So those are incongruent components: peace and genocide. The players that come together, and the silence now that a human atrocity is taking place at this magnitude. Where is the Nobel Peace Prize committee now? Did anybody say, you know what, we acted too soon? Perhaps we should withhold that peace prize, because this is totally counter to what humanitarians believe a peace prize should be all about. So the alignment to me looks like foreign policy. The world leaders know what their position is in the Horn of Africa, how it aligns with their strategic positions around, let's say, the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and all the way up to the Suez Canal. Everyone knows what stability means to those very powers that we are asking and advocating to come in and to offer some type of aid and support. And so, to me, there is a strategic alignment that the human cost, these lives, this displacement, these tragedies, as horrendous as they are, do not upset the strategic foreign policy of these foreign nations and powers. And so, to me, I think there is an alignment. And the reason this has gone on for 667 days is because it doesn't interrupt the strategic interests of the global powers. Now, as it relates to, you mentioned the work in the House of Representatives, and then also the Senate. I want to give you those bills. Of course, it's HR 6600, what we're talking about, and we're talking about the Senate Bill 3199. Both of those bills have been introduced into Congress, but they haven't moved forward beyond introduction. I think the Senate resolution was introduced in November of 2020 of 21. Recently, I think the HR 6600 was introduced in February 2022. They're introduced. Are they important? And excuse me, because, I got these allergies. Are those bills important? Yes. Is the work from a political standpoint important? Yes. Is the advocacy important? Yes. Is there a need for paid lobbyists? Yes. Because all of these mechanisms are what moves the system forward. But what's most important is the understanding of the people and your advocacy, and you're making a system move, because the system won't move in and of itself. The reason the work of the Tigray and the diaspora is so powerful, because it's shedding light on darkness. And more ordinary people are saying what's going on for 667 days. And in a democracy, we ask our leaders to give us answers to policies and actions that are done in our name. So there would be some that would say, you know what, the political option and advocacy is not needed. That's not true. That advocacy is very needed. However, everything is needed because it's interconnected. For example, the advocacy on the streets, the advocacy in the halls of power in Congress, the writing your representatives, even at the local level. For example, your city council, as it relates to the spending and the investment and who we are placing our dollars with, because our dollars are also going to murdering and drone attacks and starvation. And so these bills that have been introduced, they talk about sanctions, but they also talk about peace. They talk about having a voice and having consequences after up to 90 days of, is this going to be called a genocide or not? In other words, it forces the question that many are afraid to address as it relates to a genocide. Because once you officially recognize that genocide is taking place, you are legally, internationally, legally held responsible for acting on that genocide. And so the bills that you mentioned, they're introduced, and I'll close with this. One of the reasons they haven't perhaps moved as far forward as you may think is because all political leaders know how to count their votes, and they don't bring things forward that are not going to pass often unless they're making a statement. That's why the advocacy must continue. That's why you must continue lobbying. That's why you must continue reaching out. That's why you must continue in the direction of a political fix an advocacy fix from the ground, a financial fix, and everything that you're doing is important. I would recommend that you don't argue about what is not important. Everyone can play the role that they're playing because it fits into the collective goal, which is to stop the genocide in Tigray.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I don't think I can ask any more questions. There are so many questions that I would like to ask, but you intertwine everything and we're able to put it together. So thank you so much for that. In terms of, I guess, the 2 points that I felt were very key to me and to the entire community, I can't speak on behalf, but at least from what I've been getting as feedback is definitely the importance of lobbying. Yes, we've been doing the grassroots work. We've been doing advocacy online and, in person, contacting our state representatives, Senate, and also the city council for sure. But the reality is that it's almost about to be 2 years. And in order to move that needle, and knowing, even growing up here in the States, I do know how politics works, how Capitol Hill works. So having a lobbyist is very important to get us to the next level. So this confirms to me that we are on the right path and we need to get our community together to be able to continue the fight. Sorry about that. And in terms of alignment, it's really important to also understand that, yes, the U.S. and the West and the rest of the world is in alignment with Abiy, because you can tell from the response they're giving us. The kindergarten just got bombed, but the entire community, even including the Capitol Hill or the State Department, their response and focus was on some oil that was taken by force, quote unquote, without doing an actual investigation. How do you respond to such things? You have to do your due diligence, find out before you go ahead and just release a press release and just talk about that. And to my surprise, the UN president himself, the general, was in alignment with the World Food Bank representative when he came out and spoke about that. That to me was really shocking and absolutely bizarre. In the wake of children being bombed and dead, this is what they chose to talk about. So I think that, again, I know we're having a discussion here, but it bothered me, and it really broke my heart to see that, yes, absolutely, they're in alignment with Abiy. Otherwise, why wouldn't they say anything? So I guess 2 questions. You've covered pretty much everything. Is there a way to, I guess, as a community, do you think that presenting a policy document on how to stabilize Ethiopia that meets their interest may help? Because I know there's the bills that are already proposed, both bills, HR 6600 and S 3199. But do you think that as a community, we should come up with a policy document to say, this is how you can stabilize Ethiopia, instead of, feeling like, why aren't you guys doing something? Maybe that's something that aligns with them since how they work, to be able to present that to them. Do you think that would help? And if so, how can we go about that? Or if you have any experience or in regards to that, if you can cover that a little bit.
Aiden, I want to talk about the first part, as you mentioned, this oil and this statement attached to oil. Mm-hmm. We can't become distracted with sideshows. 667 days of systemic rape, starvation, lack of communication, hospitals being bombed, children being murdered. We have to stay focused on that, because the strategy is to say, well, let's talk about oil. And when you start talking about, say, for example, the oil or ancillary issues, it begins to answer the question. It moves you in the mindset of, let's talk about why we're allowing children to be murdered. And then it makes you want to reconcile in your head, well, they're being starved because someone took some oil. The hospital is being bombed because someone took some oil. The systemic rape is taking place because the Northern Command was attacked. In a modern world, rape is never good. Starvation is not good. The very energy that someone would say and use to say, who took the oil? Why wouldn't that same energy be used to say, why haven't individuals being able to communicate inside of Tigray for 667 days? I'm outraged by that. Why wouldn't that same individual say, and why are Eritrean troops in a sovereign nation? That same energy would move forward and say, and why are drone attacks being deployed on citizens? And so we have to think about what you mentioned in terms of alignment. We have to say that is incongruent and we have to call it out. And so as it relates to a policy document, one strategy, Aiden, in my opinion, that works brilliantly is presenting the case to policy makers and lawmakers. And it's just not on Capitol Hill. It's your philanthropic world. It's your humanitarians. It's your not your NGOs. All of these different entities. Many of them are very articulate as it relates to the Horn of Africa. They've got policy specialists. They have an internal mechanism that can tell them a little bit about what's going on, and then they can make a decision about what's important to them. However, most individuals do not. Most lawmakers have a small staff. They have a smaller reach, and it is beneficial to put policy statements and positions and talking points and education. I'm talking one-on-one education about what is taking place. Because if you don't do a policy document, what you're going to have is, and I'm just going to use this term, and I use it intentionally and not as a way to divide. I'm going to say you will have the Amhara elite speaking for all Ethiopians inside of policy agendas and saying, this is what we want. As long as I've been watching this conflict unfold for 667 days, prior to Abiy Ahmed's genocidal attack on Tigray and throughout Ethiopia, if someone came to me and talked about Ethiopia, I would have just taken for granted that it was about the Amharic language, traditions, their land, their wants, and I wouldn't have known that there is a difference of opinion as it relates to government and who is and who is not an Ethiopian and who gets to carry the story about who is and who is not. That's why it is so powerful that the Tagaru community is saying, who are we? Tagaru.
That's right.
They have to go to these policymakers and say that, who are we? Tagaru. Those policymakers are going to say, what do you mean by that? Aren't I just talking to an Ethiopian? And now you've got an educational opportunity to explain at a deeper level why this is not only taking place now, but there's a long history of it. And if you want to go to a historical standpoint, Tigray has always been the region that said no to being consumed and driving forward an imperial agenda in terms of hegemony. They have always maintained their strong sense of identity and have not been willing to give it up like many other ethnic groups. Today, the ethnic groups are able to speak their languages, share their cultures, and also have self-determination, when in the past, the very ones that are fighting what's taking place right now would have said, we have to all merge into one identity, and that identity is my elite identity, and I will represent us to the halls of power. That being said, it's super important for you to educate, policy documents, historical information, um, um, and anything that a small staff or an interested person would want to know from a factual standpoint to help make good policy. Genocide is not a good policy.
Well,
Absolutely. Well stated. Go ahead, Danny. Sorry.
oh no, I was just going to say, brother Jeff, you do a great job educating on your shows, historical facts, and you know more about Tigray than a lot of Tigrayans that I know. But I just wanted to follow up on, and I'm just so glad to hear you say advocacy work, diplomacy work, that's including protests, being out on the streets, and you know how powerful protests could be. And then we've been out doing this protest for over 21 months now, speaking for our voiceless people. We actually have an upcoming global protest that's going to take place, organized by SJT, by the way. That's going to take place on September 11th, September 12th, and some cities will do it on the 10th. So my questions for you, just tell us how powerful a protest can be and how they work, and then also what tips you can provide us, and then finally, what would you say to young Tigrayans and women and men that are just sitting at home and say, we've been protesting for 21 months. They haven't taken a meaningful act. Why am I getting out there and being a voice again if they're not going to hear me? What would you say to those folks, please? Thank you.
The first thing I would say is your opposition is never going to tell you that you're winning or that anything that you're doing is successful. So the opposition is going to always move to plant a seed of doubt in you as to your efficacy and even your tactics and your strategies. What I would say is, what would you stop doing if your mother was being raped, if your daughter was being raped, if your family was being starved? What part of your approach to that would you say you should take off the table? Because nothing comes off the table. I'm not going to stop I'm not going to stop armed resistance, because I know that genocides have never come to an end without armed resistance. First of all, I do know that the policy approach is important because it moves governmental entities into action, and in some cases have led to armed troops landing on the ground to stop genocides. And so I would say, you don't stop protesting, you don't stop fighting, you don't stop resisting, you never give up, you don't back up, as long as you hear the cries of your mother, your children, your countrymen and women. You start understanding that you haven't had a chance to even talk with your family members for 667 days. There is no one that can tell you what you shouldn't do. There's no one who should tell you who you should talk to and who you shouldn't talk to. I'm going to talk to every ally and everyone that is helping to stop the genocide without being politically correct about it, without turning on each other about it. Because right now, even with SJT and what we're doing, some would say this is not making a difference. I would say it's making all the difference, because you don't know who's watching this. You don't know who's going to say, you mean to tell me that systemic rape has been documented and verified by Amnesty International? You don't know who's sitting on the board. You don't know whose child is watching and their mother or father is a senator or a congressperson. You don't know what school person that you're talking to and educating, and you don't know what homes they're going to go home to and ask their parents, who may be in positions of power and influence as it relates to a genocide. And they look at their parents and say, what are we doing about this? 667 days. Think of it. President Clinton bemoaned the fact that he was quiet as it related to the Rwanda genocide. He said it was one of his greatest regrets as the president of the United States of America. And what was it? The Rwanda genocide. Are you attempting to tell me that at some point in President Biden's life, where he sits down and looks back on his tenure as the president of the United States of America, there's not going to ever be a conversation that comes up in his mind that for 667 days, somewhere on the planet, based on his reach, scope, understanding, etc., that there was silence. There was not a firm approach to this genocide like there is in Ukraine. At the end of the day, everyone's going to have to answer to what they did with the knowledge they received. And that's what SJT is doing. That's what Aiden is doing. That's what Danny is doing. That's what the protesters are doing. They are alerting the world. They're ringing the bell. They are taking away the excuse that we didn't know. If anyone is watching this right now, they no longer have an excuse to say, you know what, in a part of the world where the world is connected, and I had an opportunity to at least share or say or sign or march or do something to stop the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet in their lifetime. This is a moment for everyone that's watching this. And so with that being said, my advice is everyone do what you can. Back away from the arguments about this is the reason why these women are being raped, even as we get prepared to celebrate Ashanda. Walk away from the argument of, you know what, this political party is in power and influence, and that's why we are allowing folks to starve to death. Back away from the historical fights where you've got a imperial state and an empire that hasn't moved from feudal subjects to democratic citizens. It hasn't made that pivot. Human rights violations are still being imposed right now in 2022. And as it relates to racism, some of the silence that's attached to racism from Western powers, the US, European powers, and others, their silence is rooted in, well, that's just the way they are. That's the way they act. You can't do anything better. You can't treat them any better. We've got to civilize them. How many lines have you heard in the history of our people, everyone coming to civilize us because we don't know how to act? And so some will say it's not racist. It's just the fact that the world is tired of dealing with folks who don't know how to act. And then we would say that can't be true because all of the resources that make this world go round come from the Horn of Africa, Central Africa, and the continent in and of itself, including the people. And so we have to say, if we're going to have a stability in the world, it has to be rooted in human rights, the respect for humanity. And there are many people who understand that. And we, through our activism, have to continue to reach them, whether it's one at a time or in mass. Everyone can do something, and we're all going to be held responsible for what we did or what we didn't do.
Thank you so much for pointing that out, Brother Jeff. I think that despite any political clashes, the reality is that Tigray has been under siege for almost 2 years. It's going to be 2 years in November. So to me, which country or which state in a continent has been under siege? Block it. Electricity, no communications. Any Ethiopian can come out, including Tigray, or say, you know, if you're able to contact your mother, if you're able to contact your family member and see who's alive and who's not, that's a blessing in that right there. So if the world, any international community wants to understand what's happening, just ask the question, why is Tigray under siege until now? They can open all the siege, they can lift the siege, allow humanitarian, not just access, but reporters to do their due diligence and report it. Don't listen to us, that's fine. Just allow reporters to go in and out and let them figure out what's going on in that state so that we're able to help. It's not even about much need of the aid. I think it is needed because of the siege. It has gotten to the worst condition possible, especially with famine. But the reality is there is no state in a country that has been under siege for that long. And I think that this is going to haunt every human being on this earth if we don't say something about it and if we don't resolve that issue while talking in peace and negotiations. So I appreciate you pointing that out and bringing in the humanitarian aspect. That I think you're absolutely right. We need to focus on that. That's the main thing. And if you allow me, one last question from me and SJT and Danny would be, there is a segment that has not been highlighted fully throughout this war, and that is our ENDF Tigray soldiers that have been serving the government of Ethiopia as citizens and as employees. Yet they were the ones to be called in back. And imagine this: a majority of them were in a UN assignment representing Ethiopia and working for the international community. And they were the ones to be called back into Ethiopia, and they were then rounded up and put in a concentration camp. And despite everything happening to any civilian in any part of Ethiopia, they've been still being arrested because they're Tigray. But the reality is the UN, these troops were part of the UN, helping to keep peace around the Horn of Africa. Yet the UN has not come out and say, where are they? They have not sent the Red Cross to check on them. They're still subjected to harassment. When Abiy troops are being beaten on the ground, they are subjected to more torture because of what's happening, and they have not done anything. Their salary have been cut. They've been starved. So to me, where is the UN? Is there, I guess, are there any legal or administrative tools that we can be used to hold the UN accountable when it remains silent in the face of active genocide? That's it. I know it's a big question that I just threw out there, but if anything, if you can touch on that, that would really be amazing.
Aiden, I think it's important. At the beginning of your statement in your question, you mentioned that there are elements that have not been discussed or highlighted. We must discuss and we must highlight, because what you have just described is genocide.
Correct.
Why were people pulled back? Why were soldiers taken away? Why were people being taken from their homes? This is not just happening in Tigray. This is happening throughout Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is those individuals were taken, they were detained, and they were targeted, not because they broke the law.
Exactly.
Like keep in mind, Ethiopia right now has a constitution. And for those who are spending time talking about someone stole the oil, in the Constitution, if someone stole the oil, you have to find who stole the oil and bring them in front of the court and charge them and give them a trial. You don't get to say they stole the oil. And so this is what the Constitution says. Now, to your point and to your statement, individuals have lost their positions. Why? Were they charged with anything? Did they commit any crimes?
Nope.
In a genocide, their crime is their ethnicity. That's what we have to underscore as it relates to those saying, is this a genocide? A genocide is based on something that you have collectively in common or something that you cannot change because it is core to you, who you are. So you just described, Aiden, genocide. And so for the world to say, or for powers to say, let's figure out if this is a genocide. Well, then let's just figure out which part of the country is under siege and why. It's called Tigray. And who are the ones that are being starved? The Tigray. Who are the ones that are being raped? The Tigray. Who are the ones without access to medical attention? The Tigray. And when you put all of that together, you're talking about genocide. And so how do we push this forward? We highlight exactly what you just said. If this isn't about ethnicity, then where are the soldiers in the federal government who are Tigray? Who are the ones that are in high positions in government that are Tigray? Who are the ones that are helping to shape policy right now that are Tigray? Who are the teachers in the university? Like, let's just go to Addis Ababa University right now and walk in there and talk to all of the Tigray professors. I guarantee you, you're not going to find any, if not many. And why? Because this is about ethnic cleansing. Some will say, why didn't the negotiations hold up? Why is this continuing? Because there's no negotiation if you have a policy of genocide. The policy is to eliminate an entire people from their property, their land, and their lives. And so if, and I believe Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, in concert with Isaias Afwerki, have a policy of genocide, then there's going to be no negotiation that's going to work. There's going to be a feigned attempt at, and a way to appease outsiders who are watching that would say, you know what, we all came to the table to have a negotiation. You never intended to have a negotiation because you planned genocides not in a day or a week, but over a long period of time. And I would tell you that this has been planned ever since Meles Zenawi and the Tigray community came to power in a place where no one except a particular ruling class of individuals were supposed to ever hold power. This didn't start November last year. This started long before. And the silence and the complicity is deafening and damning. And we have to continue to raise our voices and say, stop the genocide in Tigray. Those negotiations didn't break down. You never had an honest attempt from two sides or a genocidal policy to say, I want to do something to stop this. Because if you wanted to stop it, you would open up Tigray. Exactly. You would end the siege. What kind of negotiation would you have without providing medical care, opening up the financial institutions, reestablishing communication, going in and having investigations? Why would you do that if you are guilty of genocide? What you would do is continue to hide it, because to open it up will verify exactly what the world has been saying. And now someone would have to be held accountable. And the ones being held accountable would be the ones that were sitting right at the negotiation table. Stop the genocide in Tigray.
Oh, wow. Brother Jeff, just to give you one thing, let's not forget the World Bank gave Ethiopia about $350 million in the name of restoring Tigray. What are you restoring if we haven't opened the siege? And the remaining is waiting to be given to them as well. So just to quickly put that out there, your comment.
Well, just think about the economic impact of genocide on Ethiopia. And not only just the economic impact, but the stability that Ethiopia was charged with by the larger world powers to create stability. What you're seeing is those dollars are going to be utilized to purchase more military equipment, drones, etc. And so now you're not financing stability. Who would invest money and dollars into a current civil conflict all over Ethiopia, and particularly in Tigray? Who would invest at this time except by saying this investment is going to be used for what? Arms to continue the fight, because Ethiopia has always been dependent on foreign financing to a particular degree. I guarantee you those drones are not free. Those aircraft are not free. I guarantee you the military that's fighting for 667 days, whereas Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said this was going to be about a week. We're going to walk in, we're going to handle this, we're going to get out of here, we're going to do all of that. 667 days later, how much does it cost to fund a military apparatus to travel throughout the country and to continually suppress an entire population of individuals? Somebody has to pay for that. And I believe that the World Bank, if in fact, and I'm sure you are correct in saying, has delivered large sums of money, I guarantee you a large portion of those dollars are going to continue a genocide. And that's shameful as well.
Exactly. I didn't want to leave that because you were hitting every point, and I think that that's another point that the world needs to know, that this is a funded genocide by the international community, and I don't think we should stay quiet despite what they're doing. We should still advocate for our people and shape the way we want to be treated. Yes, we're Black. Yes, Africa has absolutely built this nation, the West and everywhere else. So to me, why would you want to destroy something that has been feeding you for centuries? And we're still going to keep fighting. And I really do appreciate your input. It's always a pleasure. The work that you're doing it's impeccable. And there's more I want to say, but let me just stop here. Danny, do you have any?
I just, before he's closing, Brother Jeff, your closing thoughts, I just wanted to say thank you for your time, your continuing advocacy work, being voice for the voiceless people of Tigray, your immense knowledge that you share with all of us. We appreciate you. With that said, I want to directly talk to our viewers to let them know that there you heard it from Brother Jeff. Let's go out and be voice for our voiceless people. This upcoming global protest is going to take place on the 11th of September in 12. Exactly what Eden and Brother Jeff's talking about, the World Bank, and then other actors such as Turkey and China and UAE are supporting, including Russia, supporting this cause. We need to go out there and be voice for our voiceless people. I want to thank you again, Brother Jeff, and your final thoughts, please.
You know, my final thoughts go back to what Dr. Tedros said in terms of we need to get back to restoring humanity. And I believe that that's what is foremost. And he also made another statement. He said that for the past 4 months, he hadn't heard any world leaders talking about what's going on in Tigray, whereas this is the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet. I want everybody to Google Tigray, and you'll see some articles that may go back to May. You might see some articles that celebrate a peace negotiation, etc. But what just has happened like yesterday and today in the bombing of kindergarten classes and hospitals, and who's talking about those different things? If those in power are not going to do it, those of us who have power must do it. And so with that being said, there's a lot at stake. I think that, you know, when you get down to the what and why and the silence and why folks do things and they don't do things, I think that, you know, the United States is only one of many players in the Horn of Africa. You've got to look at what China is doing and what Russia is doing and how everyone is moving to impact and control what's happening in the region. And that should not warrant silence. The policies, the politics, the resources should not elicit silence in the midst of genocide. And with that being said, I'll just say Tigray Tisa happy Ashanda, and you know, don't give up, don't back up, because your fight is just, and there are humanitarians all over the world that stand with you. You're not standing alone.
Thank you immensely. Thank you so much to you, your family, your community. I know the Brother Jeff Cultural Center is also like it's making a huge impact in in our community. So I just want to say thank you, and to the ladies who are Tigrayan, and who are not, and are supportive of our community. I want to say happy Ashanda. Next year, if you want to celebrate with us, even this week, throughout September, we're going to be celebrating Ashanda, New Year, Giz New Year, and Mescal. So if you want to come into our community, enjoy the festivity, enjoy the fight, and want to, decorate yourself with this traditional hairdo and everything else, we're more than happy to welcome you. And thank you so much again. And please fight the good fight, fight for your right. Fighting for others is fighting for yourself. So with that said, thank you, Brother Jeff. Thank you, Danny. And thank you, our viewers, for joining in. And please contact us anytime. Visit our website, SJT, Security and Justice for Tigrayan.org. If you have any comments, if you want to involve in any projects, we're always there. So please reach out at any moment. And have a great evening. Have a great week.
Thank you. Yes.